Oh, hello, great readers. I'm Belchan.
I'm Nimakong.
I'm Van Chan.
In this class, I'll read to all of you a part of Great Expectations.
As.
Ah.
Great Expectations. Charles Dickens. Fab. 7 Sec 1. At the time when I stood in the churchyard reading the family tombstones, I had just enough learning to be able to spell them out. My construction even of their simple meaning was not very correct. To a bit of world. Family. Neither were my notions of the theological positions to which my catechism bound me. Although accurate. 4. To go through the village from our house in one particular direction. When I was old enough, I was to be apprenticed to Joe. And until I could assume that dignity, I was not to be what mice Joe cold pump-eyed, or as I render pampered. Therefore, I was not only odd boy about the forge, but if any neighbour happened to want an extra boy to frighten birds, or pick up stones, or any such job, I was favoured with the employment. In order, however, that our superior position might not be compromised thereby. A money box kept on the kitchen mantel shelf, into which it was publicly made known that all my earnings were dropped. The national debt. But I know I had no hope of any personal participation in the treasure. Wopsle's great and kept an evening school in the village. That is to say, she was a ridiculous old woman of limited means and unomitted infirmity. He used to go to sleep from 6 to 7 every evening. The society of youth who paid 2 pence per week each, for the improving opportunity of seeing her do it. She rented a small cottage, and Mr. Wopsle had the room upstairs. Manal, and occasionally bumping on the ceiling. There was a fiction that Mr. Wopsle examined the scholars once a quarter. What he did on those occasions was to turn up his cuffs, stick up his hair, and give a Mark Antony's oration over the body of Caesar. This is always followed by Collins's Ode on the Passions, wherein I particularly venerated Mr. Wopsle as revenge, throwing his blood-stained sword in thunder down, and taking the war-denouncing trumpet with a withering look. It was not with me then, as it was in later life, when I fell into the society of the passions, and compared them with Collins and Wopsle, rather to the disadvantage of both gentlemen. Mr. Wopsle's great aunt, besides keeping this educational institution, kept in the same room a little general shop. She had no idea what stock she had, or what the price of anything in it was, but there was a little greasy memorandum book kept in a drawer, which served as a catalogue of prices, and by this oracle she arranged all the shop transactions. Biddy was Mr. Wopsle's great-aunt's-granddaughter. I confess myself quite unequal to the working out of the problem. What relation she was to Mr. Wopsle. She was an orphan like myself. Like meat. Too. Had been brought up by hand. She was most noticeable, I thought, in respect of her extremities. For her hair always wanted brushing. Her hands always wanted washing. and her shoes always wanted mending and playing at heel. This description must be received with a weekday limitation. On Sundays, she went to church, elaborated much of my unassisted self, and more by the help of Biddy than of Mr. Wopsle's great aunt. I struggled through the alphabet as if it had been a bramble bush, hitting considerably, worried and scratched by every letter. After that I fell among those thieves, the 9 figures, who seemed every evening to do something new to disguise themselves and baffle recognition. But at last I began, in a purblind groping way, to read, write, and cipher on the very smallest scale. One night I was sitting in the chimney corner with my slate, expending fits on the production of a letter to Joe. I think it must have been a full year after our hunt upon the marshes, for it was a long time after, and it was winter in a hard frost, with an alphabet on the hearth at my feet for reference. I contrived in an hour or two to print and smear this epistle. There was no indispensable necessity for my communicating with Joe by letter, inasmuch as he sat beside me and we were alone. But I delivered this written communication, slate and all, with my own hand, and Joe received it as a miracle of erudition. I say, "In." "Old chap," cried Joe, opening his blue eyes wide. "What a scholar you are." "I should like to be," said I, glancing at the slate as he held it, with misgiving that the writing was rather hilly. "Why, here's a J," said Joe, "and O equal to anything. Here's a J and an O. In. And a J-O." I had never heard Joe read aloud to any greater extent than this monosyllable, and I had observed at church last Sunday, when I accidentally held our prayer book upside down. All right. Wishing to embrace the present occasion of finding out whether in teaching Joe I should have to begin quite at the beginning, I said, "Ah, but read the rest." "The rest?" "Pip," said Joe, looking at it with a slow, searching eye. "1, 2, 3, 1. Here's 3 G's, and 3 RS, and 3 JO. Shows in it." I leaned over Joe, and then, with the aid of my forefinger, read in the whole letter. "Astonishing," said Joe, when I had finished. He spoke arduously. "Joe," I asked him, with a modest patronage. "I don't spell it at all," said Joe. "It can't be supposed," said Joe. "Oh, I'm uncommon fond of reading." "Are you?" "Come on. Give me," said Joe, "a good book, or a good newspaper, and sit me down afore a good fire, and I ask no better." "Alright," he continued, after rubbing his knees a little, "when you do come to J and O, and says you, here, at last, is a J-O. I derive from this that Joe's education, like steam, was yet in its infancy, pursuing the subject, I inquired, "Didn't you ever go to school?" Joe. Why didn't you ever go to school? Joe. Well, it's Joe, taking up the poker and settling himself to his usual occupation when he was thoughtful of slowly raking the fire between the lower bars. I'll tell you. My father, he were given to drink, and when he were overtook with drink, he hammered away at my mother. Most unmerciful. It were his master only hammering he did. Indeed, excepting at myself, with which he didn't hammer at his animal. Our listening and understanding is consequence. My mother and me, we ran away from my father several times, and then my mother, she'd go out to work, and she'd say, Joe, she'd say, "Anne, please God, you shall have some schooling, child," and she'd put me to school without us. So, of the houses where we was, to give us up to him, and then he took us home and hammered us. Bishop, you see, it did Joe, posing in his meditative raking of the fire, and looking at me, certainly, though mind you, it did Joe, with a judicial touch or two of the poker on the top bar, rendering unto other due, and maintaining equal justice betwixt man and man. My father were that good in his heart. I didn't see, but I didn't say so. Well, Joe pursued, somebody must keep the pot billing in, or the pot won't boil. I saw that, and said so. Consequence. My father didn't make objections to my going to work, so I went to work at my present calling, which were his too, if he would have followed it, and I worked tolerable hard, I assure you. Till, in time I were able to keep him, and I kept him till he went off in a apoplectic fit, and it were my intentions to have had put upon his tombstone that, what seemed the feelings on his part. Sure, he cited this couplet with such manifest pride and careful perspicuity, that I asked him if he had made it himself. I made it, said Joe. My own self. I made it in a moment. It was like striking out a horseshoe complete. In a single blow. You the truth. Hardly believed it were my own head. As I was saying, it were my intentions to have had it got over him. What poetry costs money. Cut it how you will. Small or large. And it were not done. Not to mention burials. All the money that could be spared were wanted for my mother. She were in poor health, and quite broke. She went long of following. Postal. Joe's blue eyes turned a little watery. He rubbed first one of them, and then another, in a most uncongenial and uncomfortable manner, with the round knob on the top of the poker. It were but lonesome then, said Joe, living here alone, and I got acquainted with your sister, Anne. I could not help looking at the fire, in an obvious state of doubt. What of our family opinions? To be continued.